Peace. Okay, so let's talk about love languages and what that possibly means to your significant other. So when we talk about love language, we're basically talking about how your lover or significant other speaks to you. Whether it's through love or through compassion or empathy, all the words that are surrounded by love. Now, love can cause confusion when the language is not clear or it's not being reciprocated well between the two of you. You know how they say it's not just about communication, it's about effective communication? That's when love steps in and say, hey, are you being clear? Am I hearing you right? Am I even listening to you to where I can actually know how to love you? Now, one may like to say, well, I just like to be thought of in a relationship. I just like the fact that they're thinking of me and that the thought goes a long way. You know, because first is a thought, then it becomes your character, then it becomes an action. So if we're thinking about how to love a person, then we can ultimately transpire that love into something greater. Now, a lot of times people may say, you know, I just want to start by saying that when the two of you have an escalated level of conversation where it's basically a lot of aggression, feelings in between the mix, nothing gets resolved, of course, because one really has to be able to step down and have that maturity and say, hey, you know what? We're both very intense right now. It only takes one of us to just sit down and actually say, you know what? You go first. You stand up. I'll sit down. It takes that sacrifice for understanding to understand what your lover means or what your lover is trying to say. But however, if we're both in conflict and we're both screaming at each other, well, ultimately, we're just going to be drifting off on a river by ourselves. And the love boat is going to eventually become shipwrecked. So, how do we prevent those things from happening? Well, that takes it back to what I said. It takes the sacrifice for understanding one another and understanding that it takes me giving up my will to want to say something. Because as women, and sometimes men too, but mostly as women, we want to have that last word. We want to make sure you're hearing us correctly. And a lot of times our love language is misconstrued by them because we don't even know what we're trying to say. We're up and down with our emotions and we can't be centered or focus on one topic at a time. A lot of times it takes to just focus on one thing or one subject to progress with many more. And now if my issue with you is, or my issue with my lover is many things and it comes in abundance to me, of course my mind is going to be boggled and I'm going to want to express it in many ways. However, if I'm expressing it in such an aggression way, am I really getting through to my lover? Is he or she really understanding what I'm trying to say? I like this little quote that I came up with. It says, only fire can bring about light, but only if one is willing to step outside the flames. And I'm going to say that again because that's very significant to what we're talking about. So, only fire can bring about light, but only if one is willing to step outside the flames. Sometimes we really have to step outside our mindset or our mind frame to understand what someone else is trying to say. It takes that willpower to say, you know what, it's not about me right now, it's about us. And how to fix us, I have to give up a part of me. And I have to put it in this center, I have to put it on a table, and my lover has to do the same. And that way we can, you know, jigsaw this puzzle together. So that's when it comes to conflict, right? However, there are times where we get so upset that we put ourselves in a box and we don't want to be bothered. And, sometimes having space in a relationship is great. You don't want to be so congested with each other's emotions that you can't even breathe or can't even see what the other person is really going through. 'Cause sometimes you can be around a person so much that's when the term love is blind come into play. So space is needed between the relationship. However, if you're the type of person that the space becomes in abundance and grand and it starts to linger, well, then you also gonna become the victim, and you're gonna say, well, why isn't he texting me? Why isn't he calling me? Why isn't he listening to me? And it's like, well, how is someone to listen to you, or how is someone able to respond to you if you don't open up your window, if you don't unlock your door? Because ultimately someone is knocking at your door, but you don't see it because you're so within yourself that you can't think, well, how am I affecting him, or how am I affecting her by me doing this? I can relate to this much well because there was a time where we went on vacation and I had told him a really deep, dark secret, and that deep, dark secret overcame me so much where I put myself in this shell and I put myself in this box, and I was doing the opposite of what I'm telling you because I was basically my love language at that time was, I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to be touched. I don't want to be in your space because it makes me feel uncomfortable knowing of what I just told you. But ultimately, we have to think about that it's not always about me in a relationship. It's about it's about us. And even though we may have strong feelings about something that just happened to us, or in a tragic event that just happened on us, think about how those emotions are acting upon another person or of your lover. Think about how that energy is being reciprocated and translated through his mind or her mind, and how she feels and how he feels about the situation. So a lot of times when stuff happens to, me, we don't think about you and how that has affected you. So that's where I had to step outside and say, you know what? I not only told myself of this secret, but now I just told you. So imagine how that makes him feel. And it takes that maturity to say, you know what? It takes two to tango. And I can't be by myself on this love boat forget it. I can't be by myself on this love boat. It's just not possible unless I just, want to be. But if you want to be by yourself, don't complain when you're alone. Okay, what's next on the list? Now, just because I do this one thing for me does not mean I love you any less. That's a big love language that gets confused and misunderstood a lot of times, because now this is aside from the me. This is more about growth. When I do this one thing for me, I am growing with myself. And if I can do for me, then I can ultimately do for you. And I can ultimately do for us. But if I can't do for me, and if I can't grow within myself, how do I expect our relationship to take off? How do I expect there to be any maturity in our relationship if ultimately I still have an immature, simple mind frame? So that's where we have to say, you know what? Let me look in the mirror. And this time, let me not just look in the mirror by myself. Let's look in the mirror together. The man in the mirror, the woman in the mirror. Let's look in the mirror together. And let's find how our energy is transcending through each other with love. So if we can look in the mirror and see how those emotions are reflecting and acting upon us, then our love can skyrocket in a way that is such joyful, and it exudes joyful noise. So I'm going to wrap this up by saying, get up sometimes. Get up and try again. Love again. Want it again. And be what you want to see in your relationship. All it takes is one, but it takes two to tango. Don't be stranded on the love boat by yourself. It's ultimately going to lead to just sadness and things that you don't want in the relationship because you're feeling alone. And if you're feeling alone, then that's when the communication comes in, and that's when the mirror comes in and comes into effect, because it's like, I'm looking at what's going on. Now it's time for me to put the jigsaw puzzle together and fix it. Alright guys, that was a session of Treehouse Talks is what I'm going to start naming my podcast, my sessions with you guys. I hope you enjoy them. If you do, give it a like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.